We're going to do quizzes and a final evaluation, but we don't want people to study for those. Like when we are studying these texts, part of our, pedagogy, so you should be able to answer any question about at least the primary text, the metan, at any time. And typically our text would be virtually all of the material that was in the metan. I remember one of the main shuyukh there, the students needed time to study for the exam, and he was like, "What's wrong with them? What do you mean you need time to study for them? We've been having the material. What have you been doing all this time?" So it wasn't like our educational systems were based heavily on memorization and explanation of those texts, and the students expected to learn it as he goes and also be applying as one is learning, especially in the elementary text, because it's almost all applicable. So someone who does that, is very easy to take a test, and the material should be right there. A benefit is it does help you consolidate and see where you're at, and inshallah ta'ala, that's why we want to do it. But we want to emphasize that people should be following the material and trying to gain benefit. Ideally, applying things immediately after the lesson that we have learned in the lesson. And that's one of the ways of memorizing knowledge, is memorizing it by works. But we want to go a little bit beyond that in this class, because we want students, we ask Allah to enable us to deliver as we took. And that's why we ask, for instance, the memorizations of the integrals of wudu and so on, that you do it in the same order as the author. Because the primary texts in these disciplines are extremely precise and refined, literally over centuries. And there's a whole lot in them and in the way they're articulated. So learning them that way enables you to deliver them that way, and it also enables you to be able to think like the scholars of that discipline gradually. So fiqh al-nafs is an objective of learning fiqh, that you have an understanding of your soul, or that you have a natural and intrinsic understanding, we could say, of fiqh, so that usually when you come to a conclusion in that discipline, your conclusion will be similar to the jurists of that school. And they say that how does one attain that? By repeating their phrases, by repeatedly studying and reviewing and articulating the way they discuss these questions, such that you become accustomed to viewing the questions that way. That's why we stressed articulating it. And some of our shuyukh, he was studying at the Rabat of Tarim with the previous Mufti of Tarim, Sheikh Fadl bin Irfan, or Sheikh Fadl Fadl, Allah yarhamu. And he got the answer correct, however, he didn't phrase it in the way it was in Umdat al-Salik, Reliance to the Traveler, so he got it wrong. Because the phrase is part of the knowledge. The ibarat of the fuqaha, there's knowledge in even how they phrase things. And you see that later in the books, because there'll be corollaries based upon how that was phrased in the early books. So if you didn't get it there, it's like, a mental footnote didn't exist. You don't have the number later, so when he adds detail to the footnote, it's not going to make sense to you, or you're not going to be able to do it as precisely. So we do want to emphasize that. I noticed that, and honestly, I could tell, which is good, it's an indication of honesty, that there are some people that were households or siblings, and they didn't get all the same answers correct or incorrect. One thing I noticed though, and fiqh is quite quantitative, especially in these early texts. And I noticed that some of the students, they picked up more of the qualitative points, but weren't as precise in the quantitative points. Like some of the spiritual benefits of the Basmala, for instance, some students who got the most of those didn't mention specifically the two more legal points of following the Quran and following the Hadith that some others might have mentioned. So we want to emphasize that while we wouldn't want people comparing notes to answer questions on a quiz, that it's beneficial to discuss these questions with someone else, right? So if you have a husband-wife team or a team of siblings, no problem studying and reviewing them together, but just when it comes time for each of you to answer your questions, answer them individually. And they say that memorizing 2 lines is better than reading 2 volumes. And 2 people discussing knowledge is better than both of those. Right? So reviewing with someone else, and also you'll see that some people are going to have more of a qualitative ability, and they'll pick up those aspects, and others might have more of a quantitative, detailed ability to list, and they'll pick that up more. But if those 2 work together, they'll each benefit one another and complement one another. So going through these La ilaha illallah, and everyone did well. You know, it was all pretty much 80 and above for the vast majority of quizzes. The first question was, why do authors begin their works with the Basmala, and what are the rulings of reciting the Basmala? And there were 2 specific, more legal points that we are looking for, and those are basically the adillah of that, the legal proofs for that. And one was emulating the example of the Quran, and another was acting on the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Every matter of concern that is not begun Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim is dissevered, or like an animal with an amputated limb. كل أمر ذي بال لا يبدأ فيه بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فهو أقطع, and that means deficient and of little blessing. And for the most part, people got this right. We also mentioned a benefit and a meaning of beginning in the Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim is acting through Allah and being reminded of everything only occurring through Allah. And that is certainly correct, and those were more qualitative spiritual points, but especially in a fiqhi quiz, we want a fiqhi answer. Whereas in the Glorious Treasure, you'll see that the way we asked was much more from the spiritual side, because that's more of a text of spirituality. But in a fiqhi quiz, you want to give a fiqhi answer. Just as, like if we were giving a nahwi quiz, talking about the Basmala, we'd talk about the grammatical features of the Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Whereas here we're focusing on the fiqhi features. The second part of that question were, what were the rulings of the Basmala? And they are 5, and most everyone answered that, though some just listed the 5 rulings without the scenarios. And we needed both, because those are 5 rulings in the Sharia. But what are the 5 rulings as it applies to the Basmala? It's obligatory in the prayer, more precisely in Fatiha of the prayer. It's mandub or mustahab when doing anything of concern in the sacred law. Eating is an example, or a very specific example is authoring beneficial texts. La ilaha illallah. It is mubah when connecting it to an action that doesn't have a nobility in the law. And again, we mentioned, there was a difference of opinion we noted there, but I don't want to confuse you, and some people pick that up. Makruh, it is offensive when doing something that is intrinsically offensive, or offensive for its own sake or in and of itself. An example was plucking out gray hair. It is muharram, it is forbidden when doing something that is itself or in itself forbidden. And Allah preserve us from that. Tayyib. Was that clear for everyone? And also, my red pencil got dull as I was writing, so some of my handwriting might be a little bit unclear, which is part of why we're going through this. And then I switched to a ballpoint pen later on. 2, in summary, what knowledge is personally obligatory? I was really happy that virtually everyone got this. And this is one of the things that we are obliged to convey to all Muslims. Yeah. Some of the real strict fuqaha, they say that the only da'wah that the learned have to do is tell everyone they have to learn. So then it's on them, right? That you have to tell them they have to learn, and they got to come learn it. So, as a minimum, we really want to raise a culture, raise awareness of the importance of knowledge. So we should all know this, and then also so that we act upon it. And it was what one needs to know of basic tenets of faith, meaning so that one's faith is sound. Basic practice, so that one's practice and dealings are sound, and diseases of the heart. And then we could expand on that. Tenets of faith were attributes of Allah, attributes of the Messenger, and transmitted beliefs. In fiqh, it was sound worship, sound financial and marital dealings, and avoiding forbidden things that one might encounter, and then forbidden diseases of the hearts and their cures. And again, virtually everyone answered that correctly. Any questions? Or if I didn't grade someone right, please pass it back to me after. Bismillah. La ilaha illallah. So then, for define belief, iman, we said to define iman and list the attributes that an accountable person, mukallaf, must know. So, the definition we are looking for here, and really, some people gave us the integrals of iman, and that is a way of defining iman. The Prophet ﷺ defined it that way, so we're certainly not going to grade someone down for doing so, but we are looking for the technical definition or a theological definition of iman, and that was at tasdiqu bima ulima bid-durura annahu min dini Muhammad, believing in what is necessarily known to be from the religion of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some people also gave the lexical definition. That was excellent. Virtually everyone got that right. Some people listed the integrals of iman, the 6 integrals: belief in Allah and His angels, His messengers, and His books, to the end of them. But we are actually looking for the technical definition there. One point, and that actually reminds me, everyone should have begun their quiz. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I forgot to mention that under number 1. And also, some people wrote SAW parentheses after the Prophet's name, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's common in prints and in the web. It's actually, some of the ulama say if you buy a book and that's printed in the book, you can return it because it's faulty, it's ma'ib. Like, it's defective. That it's defective to just write that. When you write sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is a prayer that is continuously recorded for you, as long as that exists. So it's etiquette with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to write it out. To write it out, like just peace be upon him, or Allah bless him and grant him peace, or sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Personally, I found if I'm doing by hand, I find it quicker. Or even you could have you can copy an icon and paste it. But if you copy paste it, articulate the prayer as well. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They say that's one of the benefits of hadith scholars, is that they're always sending salawat on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they write a lot of salawat on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's an etiquette that we should apply. La ilaha illallah. And then we asked folks to list the integral the attributes of Allah that a accountable person, a morally responsible person, must know. And people did excellent on that. For the most part, everyone listed the 13 attributes that and really you can expand those to 20 due to like a slightly really a contention that some of the theologians had, but just out of being elementary and succinct here, we didn't do that. You're going to see longer treatments where they expand it to 20, and it's simply by like mentioning a nuance of the last 7, that he has these attributes and he is this way. And for that reason, we're not going into that level of detail. But just to understand that it's not entirely precise the way I asked this, because technically a person should know 7 more, but they're implied by these 7, by the last 7 of these. So they were existence, oneness, being dissimilar to his creation, or dissimilar to everything that exists in time and was created, that he's beginninglessly eternal, everlastingly abiding, exists in himself or through himself, and then also that he is possessed of almighty life, knowledge, will, power, speech, hearing, and sight, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we wanted to expand that to the 20, and that he is living, knowing, powerful, willing, hearing, speaking, and seeing, subhanahu wa ta'ala. No. La ilaha illallah. And folks are really well placed, especially if we get a chance to do another theological treatise, just solely in Tawheed, for us to do a treatise with Dr. Omar, which is one of the things we wanted to accomplish with him. He wanted to give us like a complete package in Tawheed, and alhamdulillah, having gone through all these attributes, that's basically what it's going to talk about, though he's going to expand. So having it right there in your mind, you've got the footnote there, and then he's going to add detail to it. And that's one of the benefits of having it like that. La ilaha illallah. For what are the obligatory and possible attributes for the messengers? Almost virtually everyone got that too. Obligatory, sidq, word truthfulness, conveyance of the message, everything that Allah ordered them to convey. Trustworthy imana, and that also is like their isma, they're being protected from sin. And some of the ulama even mentioned makruh and khilaf al-awla, doing things that are offensive or less appropriate. Someone might say, oh, how did the Prophet ﷺ do things that for us are legal offensive? For him they were obligatory because it showed that it wasn't prohibited. Like there might be a prohibition and then you find the Prophet ﷺ do it. His doing so indicates that it wasn't a forbidden prohibition, that it was a prohibition tanzihan, so that it was makruh rather than muharram. So his doing so, because he was legislating, was obligatory for him, sallallahu alayhi wa. And then fitana is their intelligence, an ability to debate opponents. And anything possible for humans, such as sickness and fever, that that don't detract from their stations as prophets and messengers, like leprosy that would detract from their station and scare people away from them. Zain. Any questions on those two? Everybody was happy with their hookup, inshaAllah? La ilaha illallah. 5. Define intention and list a valid intention of ablution. Most everyone got that. We really were looking for just the fiqhi definition of intention, and aim to do something coinciding with its performance. And then an intention, nawaytu tahara lis-salah, I intend purification for prayer, or nawaytu farad al-wudu, I intend to perform the obligation of wudu. And virtually everyone got that. One student, they actually mentioned an intention that I don't believe would be valid. So, and I wrote that on their paper. So we want to make sure we got that intention right. La ilaha illallah. And we asked to have someone check you as you list the integrals. Some people wrote it out, but some just mentioned, again, I got all 6, or I got this many, or what have you. Everybody kept doing it. We wanted people just to memorize it, so you had as many tries as you wanted, as there were days, and everybody got it, alhamdulillah. La ilaha illallah. Dr. Omar, who was mentioning to me about actually studying the rhetorical style of excellent speakers like Malcolm, and he said to memorize them. And he said, and the benefit of memorizing, because when you memorize knowledge, you can internalize it. Right. You carry your knowledge where you go. So again, there's some lists, and especially those integrals and conditions, we do want people to memorize, and part of the benefit of that, and honestly, these are elementary texts. Sometimes by the time you're in the later text, you couldn't deliver it the same way you could when you were studying it, but you do embody it, and it's right there when you review it. So we can't emphasize that enough. There's great benefits to it, and also bear in mind that there's light in this. So you're filling your heart with something that's light. These are all all meanings of the revelation and prophetic speech that were understood by the ulama. So they're from after the book and the sunnah themselves. They're from the best of the things that a believer can put in his or her heart. Bismillah. La ilaha illallah. Inshallah it will be possible for Rukn al-Iman. But don't review this video when you take the quiz. You could excuse yourself too and come back and take the quiz, inshallah. La ilaha illallah. And then the 6 causes of ghusl, everyone got those. Have someone check you, the breakers of wudu, everyone got those. The conditions for sleep not breaking wudu, some confuse that with dozing. Dozing is one thing, sleep is another. So dozing, even if you're laying down, your wudu is not broken. Why? Because it's not sleep. So dozing, it's muqaddimat an-nawm. It's what precedes sleep. A sign of it is hearing, but not being able to easily respond. Unless you wake up all the way, then you could respond. And sleep, a sign of it is a dream. But that's one question. If we're not sure if we dozed or slept, or we know we only dozed, you could lay down flat on your back or lay down on your side and your wudu would be intact. But if one sleeps deep, right? Like you might, sometimes you're on a plane and you wake up, boom, and the plane touched down and you woke up. You were asleep and you might have slept, a 4 or 5 hour period of time during a flight. So that's kind of sleep, when you're actually full-blown sleep, not dozing. Your sleep, there are conditions under which your wudu is not broken, and therefore, most of us got them, some of us missed a couple, that you're firmly seated, that you awaken in the same position in which you fell asleep. They say that you're of moderate build. Again, we explained that just by experience or observation, there are anatomical elements to this. So someone who's really emaciated or really obese, there's not pressure that would prevent them from losing their wudu. And then that someone who was upright didn't inform you that you lost your wudu. So those were 4 conditions, and that should be noted. And then the unmarriageable kin, due to kinship. I wrote that question wrong. I was asking for all of the unmarriageable people, and 7 of them are from kinship. The same 7 are from wet nursing, and then there are 4 who are in-laws. So pretty much everyone got it. I corrected it once, and then I realized that like one of the last quizzes that I had mistakenly written it, so that's why there's so much scribbling there. I tried to add more points to everyone because it wasn't really fair to ask for all 18 when I only articulated what would have been 7. Just one point, a lot of us missed nieces and nephews, that they're specifically from the brother and the sister, that this expands them to 7. And again, that's just speaking like the Quran in this case, actually, because that was how the Quran phrased it. We only took like a point off for that. So those were those. And it was 7 from kinship, and they are parents, children, and also parents and on up. They weren't 2 individual people. They're just one category. Parents, grandparents, on up, both sides, they're one category. Children, the same, on down, one category. Siblings, paternal and maternal, paternal aunts and uncles, maternal aunts and uncles, sisters, children, brothers, children. Those were the 7 from kinship. Same 7 from wet nursing. And then from the in-laws, they were spouses, parents, children of spouses, spouses of your children, and spouses of your parents. So those were 18. And for the most part, people got that. And La ilaha illallah. One person mentioned cousins. Cousins are not mahram. First cousins are not mahram. In the Shafi'i school, it's makruh to marry them. Second cousins and beyond, it's not even makruh. And Sayyidatina Fatima and Ali were cousins, not first though, but they're cousins, because Ali was the Prophet's first cousin. Yeah. So cousins are not mahram. That's a big issue. Wudu is an issue, khalwa is an issue, and other things. And it's quite common. It's quite common to marry cousins in the Muslim world still, especially in tribal societies. It's quite common. So that is a point to bear in mind. So are there any questions on any more of that? And if somebody has a private question about their quiz, something I messed up, please let me know. And again, we're not like grading percentage-wise and what have you, but we just want everyone to have understood the material. La ilaha illallah. Yes, sir.
Will you correct me if I'm wrong? Was one of the Prophet, peace be upon his wife, one of his cousins? I'm trying to remember. He had 9 wives, right?
Wallahu alam, Sayyidatina Zainab. One of the Zainabs was at least a distant cousin. That's what's in my memory, and wallahu alam. Yeah, but definitely Sayyidatina Fatima and Ali. La ilaha illallah. In a sense, all of Quraysh are his distant cousins, at least, yeah.
I have a question, but it's not from the quiz.
That's okay. Are there any others on the quiz before we move on? And if anybody needs to be excused for care, faddal. Faddal. And we're going to pray in a minute too. Go ahead, Qasim.
You mentioned before that if someone learns that maybe an act of the salah from what in the past wasn't correct, then it's best that this person makes up their past salah.
If it wasn't valid in the view of any of the ulama,
So let's say if it wasn't valid in the Shafi'i,
but it's valid in the Hanafi school, right? For instance,
yeah.
Generally, like to a public audience, the shuyukh won't tell them to make it up. But as mujahada for an individual student, just out of avoiding difference of opinion, they might advise them to make that. But it's not obligatory. It's permissible to do taqleed retroactively of the imam who it was valid with.
Well, if someone is in that position and they want to make up salah from the past, how would they go about it? Would they pray the past pleasure time and the past door time?
No, it doesn't have to be in its time. It's better that it be in order. Some of the ulama, especially if it's missed without an excuse, say it must be in order. So if one had a period of time when one was missing, but actually if it's something like that, it wasn't really missed without an excuse, wallahu alam. But the easiest way to do it is days. Like I'm going to do one day, and then another day, and then another day. And when you've done it, write it down. So if you keep a paper or hang a paper up in your house and just write checks for the days you've completed. That's one way to do it. They have apps, yeah. But if you break your phone, you're illin. So unless it's in the cloud, I guess. If it backs up to the cloud, la bas. But online. Oh, okay. Yeah, there were some folks who didn't answer both parts of the questions, of some questions. La ilaha illallah. Oh. Yeah, I thought we said it was open notes. Afwan minkum. Did we say that? We didn't say that in the email? It was open notes? Yeah. Yeah, it was open notes. Yeah, they'll be receiving feedback, inshallah. Those who receive them virtually.
I think certain questions refer to you being able to use notes.
No, it wasn't in any specific question. It was supposed to be for the whole thing. Yeah.
Maybe in the weekly emails.
Yeah, in the weekly emails it should have come out. Yeah. Some of your, please, mashallah. Risala Jamia, I wouldn't recommend that someone who doesn't understand Arabic memorize it in Arabic. There's not a lot of benefit in that. And really, Safina is an easier book to memorize than Risala, if you're going to try to memorize the whole matan. Risala is Mubarak, though. I wouldn't discourage anyone from memorizing it, but I would probably say Safina's easier to memorize. Second cousins are not mahram. Can they see you with no hijab? No. They can't. That's a woman's second cousin. That's a man. Her head and hair and neck are awrah for him. So she must cover it from him seeing it, and he's not allowed to look at it. For the answer, first cousin or second, any cousin, yeah. For Tahira, the answer is yes. You can get my email from Ahmed. And we'll adjust your score. And another one.